All right, this is lesson 11, trigonometry day 1. So it should look like this. And unfortunately, copies of copies do not show that plus very well. So here's what I need you to know, this one. Now I'm going to use all of these on my homework per se, but like for the actual ACT, this is the one you need to know. Sine squared plus cosine squared equals 1. I'm going to just quickly walk through how we can use other things. So if I had sine squared plus cosine squared, theta equals 1, and I said, what does cosine squared equal? Well, I would need to move this sine squared. So cosine squared is the same as 1 minus sine squared. I have students all the time that will say, Ms. Cooper, why is the squared here? Because technically it's cosine squared, like this. Mathematicians are lazy, so we don't want to use parentheses and all that. And we also cannot say this. That's not equal, right? This is just the theta is squared. So trig is all Greek, and a lot of students hate it, but some people love it. I love it. But I recognize if you're lost in this, just write your notes and be like, well, that was fun. I don't know what to say. It's hard, and I wish I was there teaching you guys and answering your questions. But right here, so that was cosine squared. What if I want sine squared? Well, again, if that's plus, I can subtract. And so sine squared of theta can also be 1 minus cosine squared theta. So in the same way, I could adjust these, right? If I wanted 1, I could subtract, and I could say 1 is secant squared minus tangent squared. I could also subtract the 1 and say that tangent squared is secant squared minus 1. So that's messing with those two. This is back in freshman year, it's called literal equations. It's where we move things in the equations to fit our needs, to use how we want. Okay, these are not on the ACT. They're just somewhere on the homework. So right here again, I could subtract that and say that 1 equals cosecant squared minus cotangent squared. And I could also subtract the 1 and get that cotangent squared is also cosecant squared minus 1. Ooh, squeezing that in there. Okay, so here's all the words. This is not sin. We're not in church. It's actually sine, just abbreviated. And cosine, not cos, cosine. And you could call it tan, but it's technically tangent. And then they're inverses, which means I can flip it. So this is cosecant, that's a weird one. This is secant, and this is cotangent. I've had students point out to me before that they each have their own little right? This is sine and cosecant, cosine and secant, tangent and cotangent. However you want to see it, there we go. Here's the trick to this though. We want to, there's tangent and cotangent, but we want to break everything down. Break everything down to sine and cosine. This is my hint. Okay. Now, Miss Cooper loves lame jokes, and it's sad I didn't get to introduce you to all my memes and stuff, but this is literally if you were to graph sine of theta, this is what it looked like. So it's gang signs, hilarious. And then we just learned that sine squared plus cosine squared equals 1. And so this joke, Alex was having second thoughts. Here's Alex. We can see that sine squared and cosine squared makes Junior's daddy the mailman. Woo, risque. Here we go. So I'm going to use colors to the best of my ability to help you guys out here. What we're looking for is clues. So right here we see the plus. And since I have my previous, so I don't have to flip a whole lot, I'm just going to use my previous one. But if it says 1 plus tangent, I'm going to go over here and I'm looking for, oh, there it is. 1 plus tangent is secant squared. So this top equals secant squared, okay, over tangent squared. Now we just said we want it to be in sine or cosine. So if I look at secant, it says it's 1 over cosine. So I'm going to use color right here. So this secant is going to be the same as 1 over cosine divided by, and then tangent, looking over here, tangent is sine over cosine, but this says tangent squared. So it's going to be sine squared over cosine squared. So how do I explain this? What we're trying to do is to break it down. I can't do anything with plus, so I had to change that to secant, and then I changed them to sines and cosines, and now I have a fraction within a fraction, so I can keep it, change it, flip it. I'm going to keep 1 over cosine. I'm going to change division to multiply, and I'm going to flip this to put cosine squared over sine squared. I can now see that the cosine and cosine, these cancel out, leaving me with just 1 over sine squared. So when I go over here, 1 over sine is cosecant. So my answer is cosecant squared. This is quite bizarre, but it is the process. What we are doing is we're giving a problem. We're going to break it all the way down to one word. It's so weird, but it's really important. It's a good problem-solving, process-driven. You don't care, let's keep going. Okay. Sine squared. There's nothing I can do with this. I'm just going to keep it as sine squared. Right here, though, we recognize that it's got a minus 1. So I'm going to look through here. Oh, here it is. Cosecant squared minus 1 is cotangent squared. So this says parentheses, which means times cotangent squared. Okay, well, sine squared, I'm just going to go ahead and write as sine times sine over 1, because cotangent squared is cosine over sine, and since it's squared, it's cosine times, oh, I guess I could have left that. We'll just say cosine cosine over sine sine. Okay, so these sine squareds are going to cancel out, leaving me with just 2 on top, so that is cosine squared. One word. You can see I kind of was like, ooh, don't do that. So we got 1 minus cosine squared. Looking over here, we can see that 1 minus cosine squared is the same as sine squared. So I've got sine squared over this sine times cosine. I'm going to get lazy and start dropping these thetas. Drop it. Okay, so sine squared means sine times sine. That's what sine squared is. And this already says sine and cosine, so I can't really do anything else. Now that I have it written out, I can see what cancels out, and I'm left with sine over cosine. We just learned that sine over cosine is tangent. So my answer is tangent. There's no squared because I got rid of the other sine, and there's not 2 cosines, it's just done. Okay, this one's fun. We got 1 minus sine squared. Can you look over at yours and see if you can figure out which one we would write down? Here it is. 1 minus sine squared is cosine squared. Okay, I said this one's fun because I like it. Here we are. So we have cosine squared over cosine cubed. Let's write it out. I've got cosine cosine, that's 2 over 1, 2, 3. So when I cancel, that leaves 1 over cosine. No, it's in the bottom. So what one word would be the same as 1 over cosine? Secant. Boom, done. All right. I think you should pause and try these two and see what you can do. Pause. Okay. Here we are. 1 plus tangent squared. We have right here is secant squared. So this top is secant squared. And we have over secant. Now, I usually say break it down, but because these are the same word, I'm going to say secant times secant over secant. Cancel that out, and it's just secant. So you would have had 1 over cosine, cosine, 1 over cosine, keep, change, flip. You would have still got it, but there you go. Okay, and right here we've got sine and times 1 plus cotangent squared. 1 plus cotangent squared is right here, cosecant squared. Cosecant squared. Okay, so I've got sine, I'm going to put over 1, times cosecant is 1 over sine. So 1 over sine squared, or 1 over sine sine. Cancel out. I've got 1 over sine, which is cosecant. If you asked your parents, they'd say, that's Greek to me. But hopefully that's a good start. I would say that if you paused it right now, I would give yourself like 3 minutes, just 3 minutes, and try to do number 7 could be on the test. Number 10 could be on the test, and number 11 could be on the test. Those are all fair games, so give yourself 3 minutes to try it. Okay, let's try. So here we are. We've got sine times cosine, so those are already just what they are, right? I've got sine and cosine, so I'm just going to keep those on top. And again, I'm going to be lazy. Sorry, I'm not going to write the thetas because it just takes forever. 1 minus sine squared is cosine squared, or we could say cosine times cosine. We could cancel those out, and we get sine over cosine, which is what? Tangent. That one is test worthy. It's not too complicated. Everyone should know those properties. Done. Number 8 is not test worthy. I doubt it would be on the ACT, but it's here, so I'm going to work through it. Tangent, as we know, is sine over cosine. Gotta give myself that little line there. Cosine, I'm just going to put is cosine over 1. And let's get a different color. Ooh, orange is my favorite. Did you know I have an orange minivan? It's true. Orange minivan. Cotangent is cosine over sine. And then we've got secant, which we know is 1 over cosine. My personal preference is right here to cancel out some stuff. So I'm going to cancel this out, giving me sine over 1. And cancel these out to be 1 over sine. And I'm going to keep it, change it, flip it. So I have sine over 1 times sine over 1. One word statement. Sine squared. Ooh, that one's so fun. Okay, looking at this next one, I've got secant, which would be 1 over cosine. Cosine squared, I'm going to say that's cosine over 1. And then cosecant is 1 over sine. When I cancel out, that's going to leave me with cosine over sine. One word would be cotangent. So again, these are more difficult, okay? But here we are. These two are test, like I can totally see them on the test. Tangent, as we know, is sine over cosine divided by sine. Sine is going to be sine over 1. It's just easier whenever we keep it, change it, flip it. Sine over cosine times 1 over sine is 1 over cosine, which is secant. And last one for this little section here. So I've got sine over 1. It's just easier. Over cotangent. Cotangent is cosine over sine. I'm going to stop myself right there and do keep it, change it, flip it. Sine over 1 times sine over cosine. And then I'm going to add in this times cosine. Okay. Cancel. Sine times sine is sine squared. That's the end of part 1.